Hi, my name's Ian, and I want to share some shocking good news. Um, I'm a dad. I'm an engineer. I've done a lot of business, and like probably a lot of people, I've been feeling a little downtrodden about the future because of climate change. Because there's no clear answers to what we need to do, and I was shocked. I was shocked to learn that something I knew about was being used in a different way. So this molecule I'm showing on the screen, it's got nitrogen and hydrogen. It is energy dense. It's easy to produce. It's used all the time, and it surprisingly might be the answer to fossil fuels. And I mean, the shocking thing is, like, how come nobody noticed? Uh, how come I didn't notice? So I'm going to take you through why this molecule kind of works and how, what answers, what problems it answers. And yeah, there you go. So the name of the molecule is ammonia. I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm sure you've never thought about filling up your car with it, though. So yeah, well, let's explore. Again, man, excited. So we need green fuels. Uh, so what's a fuel? Uh, Coal, diesel. They're energy dense, meaning in a gas tank, there's a lot of energy. A gas tank, you can drive a car for a long way. You can store energy. So a windmill makes electricity, but if the wind's not blowing, there's no, you need a separate battery or something to transport that, sorry, to store that energy, okay? And transporting energy, we there's a lot of reasons why you need to be able to move energy around. Um, so it, from a cost perspective, to being able to fill a truck with diesel, um, it's just a very different business problem than trucks driving around with batteries and fill. Like, you couldn't have a battery pack on a truck that drove to a gas station, a battery station, and filled up the like, that's not how that would work. So it'd be nice to be able to transport energy. So fossil fuels, let's just sort of define them very quickly. They're carbon and hydrogen variations. So sometimes there's a string of carbons all with a bunch of hydrogens. Sometimes it's as simple as this. This is methane. And why they're fossil is they're under the ground. They're under the ground. So we're digging them up and burning them, which means the carbon goes from under the ground into the air. And that's the net change. Okay. So that's what's causing the issues. A tree absorbs carbon out of the air, decomposes, burns, and releases the carbon back into the air. And so over a millennia, you can have trees absorb and release, and no real net change in the atmosphere. But if you dig up carbon from under the ground, huge net change. Okay. So fossil fuels aren't just like a little bit, right? It's not like a couple like plastic bottles here and there. It's a huge amount of North America's energy consumption. So here, this bright green pie slice, if we could take our entire electric grid and make it totally green, that would only be 25% of the total pie. And then, how many cars can we have run on batteries? Well, there's limits to that because there's limits to mining batteries. Um, and there's limits to practical application of batteries. You can't run a cruise ship on batteries. There's not enough energy in them, right? You need fuel to run a cruise ship. So that's just where all of this gray stuff is. This is fossil fuels. We use so much. And batteries are not an obvious solution, nor is green electricity, right? There's reasons we don't run cruise ships on power lines, right? Like they're on the ocean. So this is the big challenge, this gray bit. So fossil fuels, add carbon, but they're cheapish. So that's how the economics work. So would anyone go on a cruise ship if it costs $100,000 a head? It's just you gotta have something in a similar price. Existing infrastructure. I mentioned fueling stations, right? Like some of the stuff replacing parts, but having to buy new property in downtown Manhattan is a different thing than changing over the gas station, right? And so, yes, for so many uses, it's just difficult to replace. Green hydrogen, people will talk about this. And so I feel like I need to address it. So green hydrogen, we've known how to make green hydrogen for a very long time. So why don't we use it? So how we make it, simple. You run electricity through water. You have a positive and negative end. You run the electricity and oxygen will bubble off one side and hydrogen the other side. And it's even pretty efficient. It's efficient, it's simple, so why don't we do it? There's an energy density problem, okay? If you filled up a gas tank with hydrogen, it would take you like a block, okay? If you fill up a gas tank with pressurized hydrogen, that's what this chart shows. So hydrogen is the little blue one. Even pressurized, the same, so the scale is millijoules per liter, but it's just, think of it proportionally. Even pressurized, you can't get that much distance out of it. Okay, it's just not energy dense. So the red is diesel. Diesel's incredibly energy dense, so a little tank will take you a long way. Okay, this green one here is ammonia. Now ammonia, it's a third of diesel, so it's nowhere near as good, but it is feasible. It could work. And especially if you start using some newer technologies. So, plug-in hybrid has like regen, doesn't have huge batteries, but has regen and things like that. Well, that extends the range by another 30%, makes it 30% more efficient. So that ammonia at a third, could we get it up to half as good as diesel? Possibly. Okay. And so if it's cost competitive on an energy basis, all it means is bigger tanks, slightly different technology, but possible. Back to hydrogen. Hydrogen, I mean, it sucks. It just... So green hydrogen, electrolysis, it's difficult to handle. It's difficult to have enough of it to run anything. Alternative green fuels. So the difference between this methane and the earlier methane is the carbon coming from a tree, right? Is it coming from something that's already above the ground? So ethanol, right? The stuff, US makes a ton of stuff with corn. The issue with this is, from everything I've read, yeah, I mean, they make ethanol, but they use a lot of fossil fuels to do it in the farming, in the refining, in everything they do to get the ethanol, they're burning fossil fuels. So even though the carbon in the ethanol is green, the process is not green, okay? You're not just simply using a windmill to make ethanol. Like, Green methane is something maybe you've heard about. So taking, for example, food waste to make natural gas, like it just breaks down and creates natural gas, which is cool. But I mean, the amount of food waste we have compared to the amount of diesel we consume, it can make a dent, but it's not a solution. We're close to a solution. Another thing about natural gas is, so there's this temperature thing that really matters. Okay, so transporting a gas is pretty inefficient because it's not dense. If you get anything cold enough, it will turn into a liquid. Okay, so hydrogen, you can turn it into a liquid, and that liquid is, it's not as dense as it's not as energy dense as diesel, but at least you can kind of carry it around. But you have to get it down to 253 degrees, negative 253 degrees Celsius. That's not practical. The energy required to do that kind of ruins any of the economics. Okay? So next thing over gasoline. So gasoline does evaporate, right? Like it turns into a gas at like 40 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, think about the density of that. That matters, okay? So ammonia, it doesn't have to be that cold for ammonia to turn into a liquid. Energy dense liquid. It's like minus, what do we have here? Minus 25 or something. So the economics of turning ammonia into a liquid and carrying it around in pressurized vessels are okay, right? Methane, natural gas, to get it into a liquid, you have to get down to minus 160 Celsius, right? So like the ammonia, sorry, not ammonia, the methane that Australia ships to Asia in big tanker ships, this liquid methane, it makes sense if you have methane and you want to sell it. But from an energy perspective, if you had electricity, you can make ammonia and ship it to Asia on a very similar ship. And because it's liquid at far less compression or far less temperature, so anyway, there's a lot to get into here, but let's just say ammonia isn't diesel, but it's way better than so many other things. Okay? So, I mean, green fuels, it's a whole complicated thing, but at the end of the day, it requires green carbon. Got to source that garbage something. And but I mean, some of these kind of work with existing equipment. Green natural gas works the same as fossil natural gas. So you know, it's definitely worth discussing, but I think ammonia would win out, right? So ammonia. Let's talk about this a little bit because, again, surprise. So we don't think about ammonia as a fuel. We use it for a lot of things. For example, farming. We use a ton of it in farming. Ammonia is 2% of all of the energy use in North America already. In farming, what we do is we shoot it into the ground. The plants need nitrogen, but for some reason, they're not very good at grabbing nitrogen out of the air. So if we do it for them, if we grab it and stick it in the ground for them, they yield like triples. So this is why we use so much ammonia. It's fertilizer. And it's rather important. But when they figured out how to make ammonia 100 years ago, the process they used, they took natural gas, cracked it, so broke off the carbon, which went with oxygen to create greenhouse gas, and then took the hydrogen and combined it with atmospheric nitrogen to create ammonia. So this is the traditional thing, right? So we use natural gas to make it, and then we use the ammonia for things like farming. And so this is the trick, okay? I think you're so used to seeing it one way, it's hard to see it another way. I put up a lobster. Many people will know back in the day, lobster was considered a garbage food for the poor. Like there were reasons rules you could only serve it to prisoners so many times a week before it was considered torture. All right, so now we see lobster in a different way, right? Ammonia, because it was made with natural gas, and because it was used as a product rather than a fuel, I think people's minds are going to shift on what it is, but there'll be a transition period, right? Or some people still think lobster's for the poor, and some people will think it's for the rich, right? It's a frame of mind. So green ammonia, instead of using natural gas to make it, I mean, this is a relatively new process. It's kind of like making hydrogen, where you run electricity into a special system, take water, and instead of hydrogen coming out, which sucks to store and handle, you get ammonia. And ammonia you can turn into a liquid and take it around on trucks, running vehicles on it. Okay, so we're making the same thing in a different way, and we're going to use it for a different purpose, okay? Even though it's the same molecule. So that's it. I mean, here's where we are, okay? So you use electrolysis to make this green fuel. You use nuclear power, you use wind power, you use hydroelectric dams, any electricity you can find, if you have water, you can make fuel that you can use to run transport trucks and cruise ships. There's no practical limit to how much fuel you can make. Batteries, there's lots of limits on how many batteries you can make, but I mean, the air is 78% nitrogen. You can make infinite amount of ammonia, practically speaking, right? And it works for fuel. It's nearly liquid, atmospheric temp. It's energy dense. We can handle it. Okay, so people will say, "Oh, it's dangerous." And gasoline's dangerous. It's dangerous. Don't open your car battery. It's practically speaking, farmers use it every day. Don't drink it, but and then there's this unseen infrastructure. It already exists everywhere. Okay, so going from 0 to 1, going from nothing to something is hard, but doubling the number of sub shops in a town, everybody knows what a sub is. It's not the same thing. Increasing what's already there, and so we already have a head start. In fact, in China, they now have a commercial vehicle that runs on ammonia. So it is started, and I'm really excited to watch it happen. All right, cool. Good news. There you go.